Hello, everybody. Welcome to this video where I'm going to be talking about propaganda. I think I've never actually officially spoken on propaganda. I have because I even looked up on my channel, like I typed in my name and then I put propaganda. And the thing that comes up are my reviews when I spoke about the series Hitler's Circle of Evil. And in it, well, obviously, there's talk of propaganda because Joseph Goebbels was the minister of propaganda or the minister of public relations, what would be known as today for the Nazi Party. Um, I don't remember if in that series documentary they mention it, but like somehow then I came to know that he read Crystallizing Opinion by Edward Bernays. And then anytime you talk of Edward Bernays, you're like, he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. So basically, like he knew all of the unconscious desire, and all of these ideas too. I'm just repeating them, which is of videos and stuff I've been looking at, where he's known as the grandfather or the father of public relations, which is basically propaganda. It's basically marketing. It's basically take something, sell it to the public, make it accepted by the public, make it look good, and make it stick, make it stay, right? If you look up Edward Bernays and what he did, if you don't know about him, and I actually think that it's important that people didn't know about him or didn't know of him in order to get the job done. So marketing works best when it's done indirectly, when it seems natural, right? I'll give you an example. Like right now in Mexico, there's this thing that where they say, like Mexico as the country and the situations that happen, uh, is they call it like supera, which is like another way of saying um, it surpasses artificial intelligence, right? Where in artificial intelligence, you can almost make dreamlike, fantasy-like stuff. But then in Mexico, supposedly a lot of fantasy, dreamlike stuff happens, right? Like you'll have Hulk dancing in the street with some random thing happening or a fight or, like just random things happening, where they actually call that like magical too. And I feel like all of that stuff is propaganda, right? Because again, you're pushing an idea, and when an idea is being constantly pushed, especially in today's market, there's money behind it. There's money behind it. I mean, people will be afraid to make a YouTube video because they think that everyone's going to see their YouTube video. And it's like, nobody's going to see it, right? Like, there's competition, and the things you see are actually the things, that are going to the highest bidder, sort of say. Okay, so I went off like on three different tangents right there. I'm sorry. But anyway, um, Edward Bernays, yeah, if you see a documentary on him, it will tell you, it will explain like all the things he did, like from making cigarettes attractive on women, where they were smoking them and they were calling them the torches of freedom in the 20s, to making like eggs and bacon and even I think orange juice like part of the breakfast, right? Like you need eggs for breakfast, and breakfast is the most important part of it's the most important meal of the day, things like that. Those, like a lot of ideas, and I would even say those are the ones we know of. Like which other ones don't we know of? um so with propaganda, like I said, you can either do it directly, which is very interesting, like this is publicity, or indirectly, where it's like, oh, this just happened to happen, and now it's like a trend, it's like a thing people do, right? And yet there's something there, like going back to the artificial intelligence thing. I didn't finish that idea. I think it's propaganda for AI, basically, for artificial intelligence in Mexico, right? Where they're basically reminding you, like, hey, there's AI, there's AI, there's AI. Like, oh, Mexico surpasses AI again because Mexico is so weird, right? So dreamlike. And even though AI does do dreamlike stuff, nothing compares to Mexico. But again, the idea of AI is there, right? Which is the thing of, I think it was like don't think of elephants and you're thinking of elephants, like these ideas, right? There's been a lot of people that have touched on these topics, but basically Edward Bernays is like the like one of the first pioneers. There's somebody before Edward Bernays, um, which actually in the book, I'm reading both of them, Propaganda and Crystallizing Opinion. He mentions him at a point in the book. um, Let me just see if I, yeah, Walter Lippmann, right, who also wrote Public Opinion. So all of these guys, kind of like this other guy whose name is Gustave Le Bon, right, analyzing the masses and how to basically manipulate people and how to get them to buy products. And there's a documentary also that's highly recommended on, I think it's called something like Mastering the Self or the Construction of the Self or something like that. But anyway, it talks of that, right? I haven't watched it, but it's along these lines of propaganda. I also did a post a while back on how, like, journalism, right, which started or didn't start, but we can go back to the Acta Diurna, I think, was from Rome under Julius Caesar, I think, if I'm not mistaken. He's the one that promoted this idea of like every day, like put out what's going on in the Congress or the people that were making the legislative decisions back then. And then Pulitzer, right? We have the competition with Pulitzer, which is something key also to take away there. Like, competition is super important. Competition, I think it's like it's like like I'll talk about competition in a moment actually, because that's like a very important topic. But anyway, I wanted to express this idea first. With propaganda, there are people who do not believe in it, and then there are people who believe too much in it and become paranoid. The key is to find the middle ground. See, and this is where we're working with extremes that are just not realities, right? The first one is thinking, like I just hit skip, I click skip ad, I whatever, like there's a bunch of ads, I don't care, it's not really doing anything to me. No, it is. It's, again, it's being repeated. You're becoming familiar with the brands, with the stuff. I always use this example. Whenever someone asks you about a certain product or service, the first one that's going to come to mind is the one that you've seen the most, and therefore you're going to think it's the best one, right? That's kind of like how that works, at least to where I can see it. But studies that show like subliminal messaging and all these other types of stuff. There's another book, which is actually by, I don't remember the name right now, but he actually talks about the ice cubes in the drinks and how, like, it says sex, like somewhere in the glass with the ice cubes and things like that. He goes deeper into this analysis. I think it's called Subliminal something, or Subliminal. I think it's called Subliminal, the book. But anyway, there are people that don't believe in it, and then there are people that believe too much in it, right? Because I'm watching YouTube videos by this guy named Scott Carney, pretty interesting, and he talks about how, or he mentions at one point, like he's talking about all these things, and eventually he says something like, "I'm beginning to sound like a conspiracy or like a paranoid conspiracy theorist, right?" And I just laughed. I said, "Yeah, because it does sound like that. It's like, oh, they're controlling you, they're mind controlling you." And it's like, yes, but no, right? Like, again, it's those are two extremes. Like, it either doesn't work on me, that's not true, even though companies spend, a lot of money on ads, and you see it because it's there and they're able to pay other things, right? Like the FIFA World Cup right now, social media, that's why it's free, things like that. And then there are people that will be like, yeah, like it's all, mind control, and like they got you on lock, so that's why I won't watch nothing, and it's like, no, like there's a middle ground, which is it's functional, it does its job, but at the end of the day, you also have free will. You have, these ideas I'm also getting from the mass. But anyway, let's just go down that route. You have free will, you have critical thinking, you have alternatives, you have different ways of looking at things, right? That's why, and I spoke on this on the double realities video where, there are two realities. There's the one that you just live, and then there's the one that analyzes how you live, right? So the one that analyzes how people live is the one that is also able to transform, right? Like, fingers crossed, hopefully I will be this year, I will be starting, I will become an editor for a newsletter, right? And if that happens, that's going to be a pretty fun and interesting journey and experience, because I'll be able to, like, see what works, see what doesn't, and be like with a mass audience, right? Which is like a whole university. So that'll be cool. Um, key takeaways here would be repetition, 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 which to me is kind of difficult because I'm super random in terms of like talking about this now and then tomorrow talking about a different thing. So, but I understand the logic behind repetition. Like, you need to somehow get the message in there again and again. In the double realities video, I spoke on this, how you can basically, and you can check it out on the channel, it's on the live section, double realities. But I talked about how you can either have direct advertising or indirect advertising, right? And indirect advertising is like I need to do something else that involves me just like act like having to mention this thing, right? Like, if I say, like, let's say I'm advertising a certain toothpaste, and I'm like, oh well, let me tell you that yesterday, like, I went to sleep at 9, like, I got ready to go to sleep, I put on my pajamas, and I put some Colgate on my toothbrush, and and like, that's indirect advertising because you're repeating ideas, right? Like, let's say I already talked to you about the benefits of Colgate and all this stuff, and then you bring it up again, but it seems like natural, right? It didn't seem that natural, I know, but it's like a bad example of what I mean by indirect. Like, you have something else you're mentioning, but in it, like, along the way, you mentioned this other idea, right? And then you do that multiple times with different ideas or with different activities, and you're repeating the same idea, right? So it becomes familiar, right? And I also gave an example there of how I'm doing it right now. So repetition is key. For me, it's a little bit difficult because it's like I don't want to repeat myself, right? But I guess to a certain extent, you do have to repeat yourself. Um, and this is important, recognize emotion over logic with conviction. So, this is the part that's really challenging for me because it's like people don't care about logic. They say they do, but they really don't. People don't care about who's right, about arguments, about the quality or how sound their arguments are. They care about what they feel, right? So, and Bernays touches on this subject too, I think, at one point. Like, people are going to react and people are going to want to think and feel the way they already expect to think and feel, right? So if you bring in something fresh, something new, it can't be too weird. And well, that's a different idea, that's a different topic, but the idea here is that you need to connect with emotions, right? You need to basically, like, go to cliches but that are effective and that are affective, right? That are emotional. With conviction means that, like I was watching these videos on, as I mentioned, of Scott Carney. Let me tell you the name of one of them because I think it's important, where he talks about these, like, what are they called, self-help gurus, right? There's two of them, Mel Robbins and Jay Shetty, right? And these guys basically, like Mel Robbins especially, he mentions, is a, I didn't know her up until, like, watching this video of him, but he basically goes into how she uses emotion, right? Where he, oh, and so does Jay Shetty, where he'll be like, yeah, like, you need to love your family, you need to love yourself, you need to love, 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 love. And they talk about love, they talk about caring, they talk about, like, all these things that will make people feel good inside and will keep them wanting to see these people, right? All right. Anyway, so we got repetition, we got emotion with conviction, and we got competition. Competition, I feel like, is a secret weapon, right? Why? Because it's a powerful weapon. So what you do is you end up like a lot of things, right? You end up pinning up something against something else. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Colgate, Real Beer. No, not Real Beer. That's a rapper. This other brand that I don't remember. But the idea here, Republicans, Democrats. So contrast, as I've mentioned, creates realities, right? And it's actually because if you only have one thing, it's like whatever, like it's non-existent basically. But if you have competition or contrast, people are like, oh, this is better, no, this is better, no, this is better, no, this is better. And that's where, things become like powerful. So like, yeah, it's all about creating stories, as they say. So an idea I had there, like for example, if I have this newsletter, would be to somehow make it so another newsletter came out, and then there was supposedly competition going on between these two newsletters. Like that gets people's attention, right? That gets people talking. It's like, oh, which one is better? Well, let me see it, right? It's kind of like nowadays when a movie comes out and people are like, oh, it was horrible. And other people are like, oh, it was the best. And you're like, I need to go see it so I can find out if it's horrible, if it's the best. But again, it's working with superlatives, right? Well, not again because this is the first time I say that, but well, it is working with contrast, but in superlative, right? The best, the worst, right? These exaggerated claims, right? It's like, nah, bro, like sit down. You don't even know if it's the best or worst. Enough time hasn't passed to know if that movie is the best or the worst, right? Like, so anyway, just to finish off these ideas, I wanted to touch on, because I was just talking about this with somebody, three things that typically people say to avoid, because again, people are really passionate and affective and emotional about these topics. They say this a lot, which I think might be even like a propaganda idea too. um, Religion, soccer, and politics, or religion, sports, and politics. It could be that way too. Why? Because people will usually have, like, look, there are people that don't care about religion, soccer, or politics, but the people that do are going to be highly emotional. They're not going to listen to reason. They're not going to want to logically argue with you, right? It's just like I feel because this has been in my family for so long. I grew up this way. I grew up in this religion. I grew up loving this team. I grew up favoring or supporting this political ideology for one reason or another. Um, so it's like, no, like you're not going to change my mind, right? So those topics are interesting because we can say there's ton, a ton of propaganda behind those ideas too, right? Religion specifically gets talked about a lot. I think back in the day, it used to be promoted a lot. We can go back to like the missionaries, and we can do like a full blown analysis of the roots and the different historical moments of propaganda, right? Of the idea of basically spreading information, right? Spreading ideas, spreading ideologies, which you can think of it as like soft power too, because you got the military, tough muscles power, right? Like I'm gonna do stuff, I'm gonna take that from you physically. And you got this other way of doing things, which is like psychologically. I think that's maybe this is where my studies on psychology have currently taken me. I mean, they've taken me here since I did the Operation Magician playlist back some time ago. But when you combine like sociology with psychology, I think that's where things really do get interesting, especially when it's aimed towards these like intelligence services or even propaganda, media purposes, marketing purposes. Um, because I think, again, and I've mentioned this a bunch of times. It's like I'm becoming my own product. Like Steve Jobs, what he said in the movie Jobs with Ashton Kutcher, right? Like you're able to create like these things that people before you have also created. You can be a creator, right? So that's so cool. It's like, you know, screw a video game, screw, these like half lame ass things that are like that where I can be creative. Like I want to do, I spoke on this a little bit when I posted the picture of like true artists are these type of guys like Edward Bernays, right? Like guys in suits. You walk up to a public, and Bernays talks about this in his book. There are so many names for these people, from spin doctor to director of communication to editor in chief to minister of public relationships or minister of propaganda, to all these people are the same thing. And then you'll walk into like these agencies which help you like promote your business, and it's like a boring building, everyone's dressed in suits or boring attire, but it's like the imagination these guys have, right? Like that's art, right? That's what creates things. I mean, apart from the infrastructure of a city, right? Streets, buildings, things like that, which is also amazing. This would be the next thing on that, right? Like actually shaping the public mind, shaping people's opinion. And I feel like I want to talk about this because I hadn't made a video explicitly on this, but propaganda is a huge, huge tool that is constantly being used now more than ever at unimaginable rates, where competition is an everyday thing, because as a consumer we're constantly being bombarded by this product, this thing, this idea, this, do this, do that, you know and to me, at least, I've always kind of been like questioning those things, right? That's why I feel like I can get behind the curtain, kind of like backstage, and take a look behind the scenes, like what's going on, and again, become a creator. Um, and I also feel like I underestimate or overestimate. No, I underestimate how people can become very influenced by this type of stuff, right? Like I would think people wouldn't, but people do, right? Why? Because I think they're highly emotional most of the time, um, and that makes them vulnerable, right? Plus, people won't be constantly critically thinking about everything, so they'll just take things as is, because 95% of the doctors in this study in some random university said so. So it's like, oh yeah, so the experts said it. Like I don't know any better. Like the experts said it. They did studies, science says it. So it's like, you can claim whatever you want and people will believe it. So that's kind of the thing. And if it's working, like people will accept it. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about, propaganda. I'm going to be reading and going into this a lot because I feel like I started to work. This first half of the year had a lot of work, so I couldn't really do things I wanted. I did other things that I also like, but what I really wanted was to get back into this. So I didn't even know it until like just a couple days ago, where I was like, oh yeah, like this is the stuff I left off on. So this is the stuff I'm coming back to, and I'm gonna be like learning a lot about this. From journalism to philology, like how to structure words, like all this stuff is it's all related because it all helps. Um, and even context, right? Bernays touches on this topic too. Like the thing you want to do is also build your network, right? Which is something, like you become a focal point to a certain extent where people are going to come to you, so you're able to help them and they help you at the same time. But yeah, it's interesting how Bernays never really became he made his uncle Sigmund Freud popular because and I was watching this video where, and it makes sense. It's like to this day a lot of people reject psychoanalysis. So especially in Sigmund Freud's time, like how did he become known if he wasn't being debated or talked about or even promoted amongst the neurologists, psychologists, scientists of his time, right? His nephew, right? Edward Bernays did it, um, and yeah, that's basically what happens there. So It's a powerful tool. I feel like it's something that a lot of people don't take seriously, and that's probably a lot of people don't even understand it because it deals also with framing theory and all this other stuff. Um, and to a certain extent, that's why it works, right? So it's like I've just come to that idea, or I've accepted that idea that just like no one's gonna understand. Not a lot of people are gonna understand this because it's too complex for them, and that's probably why it works on them. But I want to learn more on this, and eventually I can do something. If I could do something related to this, that would be awesome. I think I don't know if that's my life purpose, but this is where like philosophy, psychology, they're cool, but I feel like this is what's next, right, for me. So anyway, I don't know if I'll be making videos coming up. I don't know if I'll be leaving sometime from YouTube to make to investigate this stuff. I'll probably still be making videos because a lot of interesting stuff comes up when I'm doing this. But like these next 2 months, I'm gonna be like just diving into this stuff deeply. So anyway, I thought I'd let you guys know, and let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.